This morning, I want to lift a scripture out of the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, and verse number 13. Deuteronomy 28 and 13. Today, we are reading Deuteronomy 28, and one of all of our favorite verses is 28:13, but I'm only going to read the A clause of 28:13. And that verse says, "And the Lord will make you the head and not the tail." The Lord will make you the head and not the tail. I'm entitling this particular devotional Heads or Tails. That's our title for this devotional, Heads or Tails. We've all, at one time or another, as adults, children, we've all flipped a coin. We've seen it done in sports events. We've done it ourselves. Where we flip a coin called heads or tails. Flipping a coin is a random, out of our control act. We're trying to decide something or determine something. We flip a coin, and wherever the coin lands, that is how it's going to be. That's who either gets the ball first, that's who goes ahead, that's who is the winner, etc. Flipping a coin, heads or tails. So random, so out of control. And then whatever it lands on, that's how the person or teams have to react or respond. Seems like we wake up sometimes and live our lives like that. That life becomes just a flip of the coin. Will it be heads today or will it be tails? According to the promises of God, it ought to always be heads. Our lives should never be lived randomly. Our lives should never be lived where we are out of control. We ought to always be living heads. Life circumstances should never control us. We should always control them. When we let circumstances decide our direction, our mood, our future, then we are living tails rather than heads. Because God promises in Deuteronomy 28 and 13a, he tells us that we are to be the head, not the tail. That means we are meant to lead even our circumstances. We are meant to take charge of even our circumstances. We are to be in control at all times, not controlled by them. And we see it all the time where people, you can tell when they're going through something difficult, some unwanted circumstance. Their whole mood changes, their whole attitude changes. They become a victim of their circumstances. And so now circumstances are leading. Circumstances have become their head, and they have become the tail to their circumstances. We ought to always be, according to what God promises us, we are to be the head and not the tail. I want to give you two ways where we allow circumstances to control us, where we become the tail to circumstances. And from these two ways, I want us to see how we can take back our rightful position. One way is circumstances control us when we react to circumstances rather than respond to circumstances. Because we're going to have circumstances, but do we react to them or do we respond to them? I know the two words sound very similar, but let me kind of exert my feeble efforts to explain what I mean by reacting or responding. Reacting is more of an emotional, immediate, without much thought reaction. That's how we attend to that circumstance. We do it emotionally. And reactions are driven by feelings of anger or fear or frustration or panic. And we let those things lead the way. That's when we are reacting. But when we are responding is more of a thoughtful, intentional, it is a considered action. It's driven by wisdom. It's driven by faith and patience and clarity. When we react, we are somewhat out of control. But when we respond, we have focus, we have discipline, we are in control. The circumstance is not. And a lot of us are reacting to life rather than responding to life. We should never let circumstances dictate our emotions, dictate our attitude. We're always in control, always responding, never reacting. And there are people who today are getting up out of bed. They laid down last night with a bad circumstance. They woke up this morning still reacting to that circumstance. They still are reacting. They still feel anger. They still feel fear. They're still frustrated. And they might solve the immediate issue, but there is no long-term consequence, no long-term focus. Learn to be responding rather than reacting. Circumstances are going to come, but respond to them. Have some plan, some strategy that's not dictated by your emotions. Emotions are so deceptive. Emotions are so untrustworthy. We argue in anger, we're impulsive, that's reaction. But when we pause, consider, seek God's wisdom, pray, act in faith, that's responding. Give you an example. When Moses leading the children of Israel, God told him to strike the rock, and he struck it. He reacted. He reacted because he struck it in anger instead of speaking to the rock as God told him. God told him to speak to the rock. God didn't tell him to strike it. God told him to speak to it, but he struck it because he was frustrated. He was tired. He was angry. So he just struck the rock, not even hearing that God told him, speak to the rock. You're in control, Moses, but now you are acting out of control. So learn that even though you have difficult circumstances, be responding to them, not reacting to them. And we have to be able to make that shift because many of us have been trained to be reactionary. Have you not noticed that when circumstances occur in our country now, we don't call them first reactors to show up. We call them first responders to show up. Because responding is intentional, it's focus, it has a purpose. A second thing that we do, I'm taking too much time with this. The second thing that we do, if we're going to be the head and not the tail, we should not allow our circumstances to control us. We should always allow ourselves to control our circumstances. Don't let your circumstances define you. That's what I want to say. Don't let your circumstances define you. And we do that. We do that. Are you living in anger right now? Are you living in misery? Are you living frustrated? Has your whole personality changed because you're in a bad predicament? Circumstances control us when we allow problems to define us. Don't become a victim of your circumstances. Remember when Gideon saw himself as weak because of his circumstances? No, just because your circumstances is against you don't mean that you're weak. You're strong enough to deal with it. You're the head. You're in control. You are guiding. You are directing. I've spent too much time talking today. I could talk about this all day and hope that you get what I'm trying to say. Stop being so reactionary. Respond to circumstances. And then don't let them define you. Don't let them control you. You be who God has called you to be in the midst of your circumstances. I feel like I'm counseling somebody right now. Don't know who that person might be, but I feel like I'm just talking directly to somebody who is in a bad circumstance and they have reacted to it. Respond, think, consider. You're the head, not the tail.